13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
Welcome back to 13 Questions tonight, this afternoon, wherever you're at, I guess. We had Keith Abram with us. This is one of my favorite all-encompassing episodes, very much in the way of like a Seinfeld. Everything seemed to tie together very neatly and nicely, and just the core truths, the mind-body connection just running through Keith's view of the world. Just, I don't know, I really, really enjoyed this. I got a lot out of this episode.
Yeah, man, Keith, this was one of those episodes that I had been looking forward to since it was set up, because Guy Murray, previous episode guest, go check it out, listener, if you haven't, he put us in contact, and I loved talking to Guy, so I knew I was going to talk to Keith, and you're right, they tied up beautifully at the end. There was something that I was going to mention towards the end there to tie it back into one of his answers to the first questions. It was something along the lines of dealing with love without judgment. It's not his words, but I didn't write the note down, so I couldn't make that point. But I wanted to say it on the intro, just because this was a very heart sent. Everybody spoke from the heart in this conversation. So it was it's definitely, I think, unique in that way. So it's gonna. So that's how I came across the guest, and I had an awesome time talking to Keith, and I'm sure, we're going to continue to probably hear from Heroic Hearts Foundation in the future episodes of 13 Questions.
So yeah, sit back and enjoy the episode. Tell us what you think. New website, a lot of nice little ways to connect to us over there at 13questionspodcast.com. Also, the email, the same, 13questionspodcast@gmail.com. And gratitudes, Bill. Are you ready for the gratitudes?
Yeah, get that gratitude.
Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude.
We didn't flip a coin beforehand to see who went first, but I think we should.
Well, I've got a dice here if you would like to roll it.
I'll go first.
All right, Bill chose to go first.
My gratitude is just music, really. I mean, the gratitude's a great example of it. We can use it to, if it can be used to get us to enter into more easily the heart-brain coherence state that we so often have talked about on recent episodes. So using it as a tool, I guess, is what I'm grateful for. We also talked about other modalities and tools in the interview, such as ayahuasca and psilocybin, cannabis, breath work, which anybody can do. I've been doing more of it myself and finding it extremely beneficial. So I'm thankful for all that. But music you can add it to anything. It's like a spice. You can enhance your whatever experience you're using, your modality to heal. Music helps in that, and what made me specifically thankful for that for music is I like to use my Spotify to do that. It's just, I got my playlist on there and my songs and whatnot, but I didn't pay for the premium thing, right? So I would get ads all the time. So I was able to upgrade to the premium thanks to my friend Ben. So I get ad-free meditation music now. So that's what I'm grateful for. And so speaking of music, support jingle master Felix Ortega. He made the gratitude jingle, which we love. And check out Superman too. He does the
closing music
song
at the end. Yep. Also guest numero uno. So go check that out.
So yeah, that's my gratitudes. More than one, I guess, for today.
I, Bill, am incredibly grateful for experts, people who specialize in certain fields. And I know that sounds general. I've got an old car and ended up having dead short electrical problem that I could not diagnose, and got the very good recommendation of somebody and was able to get it identified and fixed. And it was a airbag diagnostic module, something that is way beyond my pay grade of being able to diagnose and safely bypass. And I'm just very thankful that there's people in the world that have that knowledge and can utilize it on things that they haven't seen in decades and still do their job well. And I don't know, those are the weird little, like, the plumber, there's skills and things, that in this mechanical era, it's just, I don't know. I like the expert, and I'm grateful for them.
And they're becoming harder to find too, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, this one was hard for me to find because the shop I've been using, that's been there for over 30 years, all the guys retired, all the electric shops that they used. So yeah, you're also seeing that across the industries, electricians, plumbers, contractors, all of that stuff, all the people that you're seeing now, it's only the old guys that are left. There's not a lot of new blood. It's sad.
Yeah, it's kind of like finding a diamond in the rough. Speaking of which,
but you can be the diamond because there's so few out there. Find your trade, find your skill. You can make a great, good living, and there's a need. And so many people just don't look at industries like that anymore. Know a lot of guys that drive a lot of really nice trucks and have really nice houses, and they do what people think is basic work.
Yeah, it's a treasure to find. Like, I keep coming up with all these analogies. We got treasure, we got diamond, we talked about pearls of wisdom.
Essentially, we're talking about knowledge.
I love it. So speaking of all those things, if you think that this podcast is any of those, we are a value for value show. So please spread the word. Share the podcast with somebody, anybody that you think that would be interested in listening to something like this, I suppose. So share the show. Time, talent, treasure. What else do we got, Adam?
Enjoy the guest.
This is 13 Questions with Keith Abrams.
All right, welcome back to 13 Questions. Today we've got Keith. Keith, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us.
I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, I'm excited too. You ready for the question number one?
Yeah, shoot.
What was the best advice ever given to you? Would you modify it at all today?
So I've been lucky enough to be advised by several great teachers and mentors, but the one that springs to mind when you ask me that question is, I'll provide some context actually. So professionally, I teach what is referred to generally in an umbrella term as the internal arts, generally focusing on the Chinese internal arts. And that involves things like martial arts, like Tai Chi, for instance, but other exercises like Qigong and meditation and internal alchemy. It's an umbrella term, internal arts. It covers a lot of things. So that's what I do professionally, aside from my charity work at Heroic Hearts. And I took that up because I was incredibly tense physically and therefore psychologically and emotionally. I was very tense and on edge for a long time after my military career and a few painful relationship breakdowns. And so I started practicing Tai Chi. And the guy, Dan Wexler, he was the first person that ever taught me Tai Chi in London. And when I was performing my movements, the Tai Chi movements, I was so tense, I looked like a robot, which is normal for beginners. But he said, what muscles can you leave relaxed and still perform the movement? And to this day, I use that when I'm walking. I use that sat here now. I'm aware of that. I teach that myself to my students, because if we're just walking or we're sat, we might be, if we're nervous, for instance, if we're going on a podcast, for instance, we might be nervous and then clenching our abdomen, for instance, just as an example, we might be clenching our abdomen when we get nervous, but we don't need to clench our abdomen. So what muscles can you still leave relaxed while performing your activity? Let's put it that way. And I think that really, that's my route into how I teach or how I help people learn from their anxiety, actually, is that it's in the body. Your anxiety is in the body. And you can normally, the easiest way to access it is find the tension in your body, focus on the tension, and see if you can't release and relieve that tension from your body. And then your mind will follow. That's a very superficial explanation, but it carries well. And so I think the second part was, would I modify it at all? No, I wouldn't. No, it stands true to this day for me. And I think I said it in my most recent class last week as well. And that advice was given to me maybe in 2013. So very handy, very practical advice. And I'm very grateful that I heard it and that I actually employed it as well.
Well, it seems to be one of the great faults of our, modern world, that there is just physicality in the world and how you use and utilize your muscles. The greatest stress reliever for health and mind is exercise, which is just moving. And then, makes it very interesting the way that you put it, thinking about like yoga, the different benefits and different things can come along with just utilizing different muscles in different ways. And I mean, it makes so much sense. If you smile, you can become happy. So why wouldn't it be like a whole system approach?
Yeah. And the more sensitivity you develop to your physical system, the more control you have over it. So the more sensitive, the more tension you can feel, which as a beginner is really unpleasant, because as you develop your sensitivity, you feel like you're just a bag of tension, which you kind of are as a beginner. But the more you're aware of it, the more refined your mind becomes to that tension, the more control you have over those muscles and tendons that are tense, and the more that you can relax them. And then before long, when you're a master, like a Uber master, which I am not, because I still have to do all of this on a minute by minute basis, you consciously relax yourself all across your body. And because the mind and body are one, the mind remains calm and equanimous, and you feel content and grateful. So it has real world applications, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't be interested in it.
Right. I mean, absolutely. You can actually use this last night, helping, to fall asleep. You can apply this to sleep too, relaxing your body. And what it came down to for me was like relaxing your face muscles. Like you don't need tension in your face muscles to sleep. Right?
Yeah. In the cheeks and stuff like that. I know that I have tension in my cheeks when I do the scanning. Vipassana meditation is actually another form, a very powerful form of this technique. I'm personally aware of tension in my cheeks. So yes, you're right. Just before bed. So you don't need to tense your cheeks to fall asleep.
What do you choose to ignore?
That's hard. It's what I choose to ignore, what I try to ignore, and I have failed, is responses on social media, because while I feel like I am, what my ego believes is casting pearls, let's say, into the social media world, other people consider it to be absolute nonsense and useless. And they, as we know, on social media, people aren't afraid to voice their opinions, which obviously they're entitled to. However, I used to engage with it, and I found that to be entirely detrimental to my well-being. And there's no real benefit to my engagement on social media. So one, I took myself off of Facebook products anyway, just for principles. And that helped a lot because it took the option away from me. But even on the one I remain on, LinkedIn, is I still have to ignore comments and just not engage because it doesn't do me any favors at all.
Well, that's actually how, we didn't connect through LinkedIn, but that's why I made a profile for the show on LinkedIn, is so that we could stay connected. But
oh, great.
And it's interesting that you mentioned Facebook. Like, I got rid of Facebook too. Like, that's, of all the social media accounts I keep for the show, like, I don't do Facebook. Like, Instagram, I kind of inherited, but we do have a Facebook page actually, but I don't pay attention to it. But beside the point, the casting pearls thing. True to that, true words, man. As far as I try to keep the social media positive, and I don't even hardly look at the comments at all, to be honest. I don't know if that's a good method or not. I guess we're going to find out. One of the things that we try to emphasize on this show is practical pearls of wisdom. And it's hard to present this knowledge to people on social media, because what can you do it with is, a meme, basically, is what I've found, a text and a picture, because that's, our attention span these days. So, dude, I agree.
It's hard. Yeah. And going back to Facebook, all Facebook products, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, it all has to go. However, I say that as kind of, Heroic Hearts as an organization, we're on Facebook and Instagram as well. It's just me personally, which is what I have control of. Is I'm not, can't do that anymore.
Well, look, we're in a new world. It's a new world of connection. So you have to let people know, and there's certain systems out there that people connect with, and you can feel like you're supporting and feeding a system, but just as an avenue for people to know who you are. You're not doing a whole lot for the system, you're just part of it. And when you're talking about things that break people free of systems, it's amazing that you even have the ability to be there for people to see you, ways out. There's also that avenue of, it's nice to have the ability to still have that presence, even if it's not, you don't have to, encompass it.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's benefits to it, of course. And I hope I didn't come across as saying that there are no benefits. However, just as a personal, on a personal level, I got dragged. I love people.
I think people need to see that nuance, because it's the classic. You're in the ocean. You need to swim with the currents. And if you're running businesses, Google ads and things like that are going to be things that in this modern world you're going to need to utilize to compete on a basic level. So. There's some things like, we can push forward with new systems while we're still, just making it better. Anyways, don't mean to sideline you there.
I was actually just talking about this with my friend Ben, episode 49. If you haven't checked it out, I have 13 questions, listener, yet. But if you look at it as like plugging into the matrix, what that means is doing it with intention, right? Because we live in a digital age. Like, we have to use these platforms, obviously, to connect. Otherwise, Keith and I, we would never be talking to each other, right? Mm-hmm. So it is kind of a necessary evil, if you want to put it that way. But if you do it with intention, right, and look at it as plug into the matrix just for a little bit, just to get your get what you need to get done, and then get out, right?
yeah, that sounds wise. Yeah. Go in, do it. It's the 2 hours that fly by when you're just scrolling. That's or getting into conflict, totally unnecessary conflict on the comments pages, which is what the answer that I was giving. It was no good for me personally.
I worry that's so detrimental to humanity, because all those hours that are just wasted. the things that we use to push us forward into innovating, in all levels is now just, it's like a time sink.
Yeah. Totally agree.
What book has been most influential on your life and why?
This is going to be contentious, I think. So there's actually, there's two. The first one I think might be contentious. In the summer of 2008, I was in Afghanistan, and I'm a combat veteran. I was a paratrooper, and the summer of 2008 was hairy by anyone's standard. And a friend of mine, so if you can hear in the background that there's some groaning, I've got a big dog laying next to me, and she's very comfortable, apparently. So I apologize for that. I should have moved her out. But sorry, where was I? Afghanistan, 2008. Yeah. My friend posted me, people send out packages and whatnot to support you in whatever way. My friend sent me The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that, as an author, don't like her, and as a book, don't like that book. I don't understand why a lot of people have called that a right-wing manifesto. And I have to say, I've read it 4 times and listened to it on audiobook once. I cannot for the life of me see how that book is regarded as a right-wing manifesto. That's why I started saying that this might be a contentious choice. But why did that book impact me so much? I read that book all the way through straight away in a couple of days in Afghanistan, and its effect was so immediate and so profound that I just started it again on the same moment that I finished it. I just went back to page 1. It was so important for me at that point. One, because of the physical context in which I found myself in the environment, which was madness and chaos and war and a lot of trauma and grief. And what I took from it in that instance was the power of the individual to shape his world, their world, to his will. And I kind of felt powerless in that environment. Not powerless, actually. I was not fully empowered, because obviously in combat it's chaos a lot of the time. And we're well trained. We're very well trained. And I like to think of myself as good at my job. However, there's naturally an element of chaos to combat. I think Mike Tyson says everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. The military has the same thing. There's no plan survives first contact. And so I didn't feel fully empowered, and I was grieving a great deal because I was losing a lot of friends at the time. And the Fountainhead taught me of the power of the individual to shape his reality to his will, and taught me the power of what real love is, free of demand. I'm not saying that that's not necessarily unhealthy, but yeah, it was that empowerment of the individual that I really took. So when I got home, having been I started making empowered decisions. Like, right, well, I don't want to go through that again. It's the most exciting period of my life. There's no doubt about it. But it was also desperately traumatic. But I was empowered. I was like, right, so what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do with my life? Do I want to be destroying things and killing people, killing myself, which I had been for years, through drink and substance abuse and war? But it gave me this power to take responsibility for myself. And to this day, it's just very dear to me, very dear to me. Have we got time for me to mention the second one?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
the second one was the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. I read it probably a bit too young, but what it taught me was that writing, when I was quite young, I always had an ambition. I used to write a lot when I was a child, and I had an ambition that maybe I might have had enough talent to become a writer in some format. And no one has quite grasped the English language like Salman Rushdie, in my opinion. The magical nature of his worlds and the grasp of the English language and how to weave incredibly intricate stories, powerful spiritual stories, political stories with real meaning and purpose behind them was really inspiring for me. And I'm aware, obviously, that now I've said it, the Satanic Verse is actually an even more contentious book than The Fountainhead for obvious reasons. But they both touch my hearts in significant ways.
In the way that books should, they give you new ways of thinking, different ways of thinking, and even if you don't buy into them, that perspective gives you truth. So, yeah, it's just lessons in, you're talking about coming out with, benefit in life that's not written in ideology, but in the way that it lets you experience life.
Yeah, great. Yes. That's it. Yeah, I'm not a fan of dogma.
Yeah, people shouldn't. Like, okay, a broken clock is right twice a day. So you're telling me the time isn't right? Then, okay.
So I don't have any experience with Ayn Rand. I mean, I've heard of the caveat that you mentioned at the beginning before you give the answer. So, but this other book that's, I guess, more contentious, I guess I'm more interested in that because I've never heard of Satanic Verses, but just by going off of a little Wikipedia search I just did, that just to me speaks of questioning evil, studying evil, and getting to know, following that path. And where does that lead? So, where did that lead you? I guess is what I'm asking. Like, I guess could you expand on that? Your answer?
It was probably the fluidity of the nature of things. Actually, to be honest, it was the perception of things is not always what we see. So what we might perceive as evil might not actually be evil. What we perceive as good may not actually be good. But really, and I started that comment before saying that I probably read it a little bit too young the first time I read it, because what I took from it was actually the magical nature of the world and the quality of the writing and storytelling and the intricate. And I've always kind of had whether I've embraced it or not is another question, but I've always had a spiritual or religious leaning. And so I was moved by that commentary, that level of commentary is a high level of commentary. So I don't necessarily, I was a bit too young the first time around. So I took the quality of the writing. It's just all of his novels are just superb.
Well, I like that you said the fluidity of nature, because what that means to me is that it would give you a different perspective. And maybe the perspective of which we thought was bad is not so much so, right?
Yeah. Especially if I look back to my military career as well. And I think, well, I was the good guy. I went in thinking that I was the good guy, and that they were the bad guys. But when I got to the end of it, it was like, oh, well, maybe they're not all bad guys, and maybe we're not all good guys, and maybe we've done some bad things, and maybe they've done some good. I'm talking on an individual level here. I'm not talking about the Taliban or the government levels. I'm talking about us on the battlefield, the people on the battlefield. I'm not talking politically here. That they're young men, just the same as I was, an angry young man that felt they were doing what was right. And that's all I was doing. It's just, we decided to sort our differences out with guns, which is, we didn't sort anything out. So,
well, it's kind of a beautiful thing about humans in a weird way. Fundamentally, we're all good, but what do you justify? And a lot of people that are making decisions, if you look at why they're making their decisions, it's justified for a different good and a greater good, and they're trying. And, it's one of the things I find most interesting about culture and what we get tied up into, because it's just like that. Once people realize, that they were part of something different than they thought, fundamentally, they don't want to be part of it. And, it's this weird, beautiful thing that so many of us have been caught up in different stories or different lies, these different mind cages, and we don't know that those other ideas are out there. Once you see them, there's something about the human being that just, can't. And I think that's most people, but, what justifications do we believe?
Yeah. Narratives, strong. It's hard to break down narratives as well, which is maybe at some point we'll talk about plant medicine, but it's helped me. Plant medicine has helped me break down my own narratives and the dogma that I was feeding myself. But things like art and life experiences hopefully presents us with opportunities to challenge that dogma and challenge those narratives and maybe break them, or if they need to be destroyed, or just change them gently day by day.
What rule do you have for yourself that you never break, and why do you think that it's important?
Rule for myself. I don't really have a rule for myself. Don't really have a rule for myself. For much of my life, in a military career, I've been very disciplined, and there were certain rules that I needed to employ on a daily basis to just get through training, get through my job, get through certain situations. But I've left those rules behind now because they're no longer appropriate. I suppose principles. I prefer to work with principles instead of rules has a connotation of something towards a law, whereas principles may be a little bit more flexible. I don't know if I'm just kidding myself here, but I prefer to work with principles. And I suppose a principle that is really important to me, given my background, is non-violence. Sorry about that. Non-violence. I've been challenged on a personal level in recent days regarding what's going on in Ukraine and the Russian invasion. That has challenged me because it's tested me, because Ukrainians obviously need to resist the violence that is being inflicted upon them. The only real option they've got is to confront it with more violence, which is hard for me to balance within me in my own philosophy, because I believe that violence only begets more violence, and that we just go round and round in a violent circle, and that it just ends in more and more people dying and more people suffering. So, I've been challenged definitely in this last week with my principle of non-violence, and I don't think I'm kidding myself, but I try and, I've got a picture of Martin Luther King up in my house because I adhere to the principles of non-violence, but it's been tested. It's been tested this week because I was actively looking at deploying myself to Ukraine, which goes against everything. That I stand for, or at least these principles. It goes entirely against it. So it's been a challenge for me.
But that's also, I think, really what the core of it is, because, if somebody goes to attack you and hurt you, you need to defend yourself, in a real world situation. And so there's this violence that's built in, but I think of things sometimes more like fire lines. If you need to prevent the forest from burning, sometimes you do need to burn a small section to prevent something worse. And it's, are you looking to burn down the entire forest yourself? No. So, the intent of mitigating the violence in the world, through a reactionary way, when it becomes personal, I don't know. It's at least I have to think of the world in ways like that. Otherwise I'd go completely mad.
I suppose my teaching, or my experiences with practices like Tai Chi and meditation, especially Tai Chi, because if people don't really know what Tai Chi involves, and they do know, there's very similar principles involved with Aikido. People might be more familiar with Aikido than Tai Chi, I don't know. But instead of hard blocks and instead of things like hard blocks, which is meeting violence with violence, Tai Chi's principles are using weight distribution and rotation in order to shift the sort of focal point of an aggressor's energy. That could be the form of a punch or a push or anything like that. So instead of just meeting punches with blow by blow, we're more interested in, we as in a Tai Chi community might be more interested in redirecting that force that we were the focal point of, that we might just redirect that away from us using in a physical world, weight distribution and rotation and other things at a more advanced level. But I think that probably kind of, again, given my context, given that I've fought so much and used so much violence, whether in my military career or not, I kind of just have to, I almost kind of have to give that my very best shot of not using violence. So even if someone is attacking me physically, I would rather not strike them back. One, because I've done that in the past and I've broken my fist, which didn't help me. Two, it cut their face, which doesn't help them, and I don't want to cause harm to anyone. Whereas if they are attacking me and I just simply move them away, if I have the skill for that, or avoid it altogether and turn away and run away, I don't believe there's any shame in that. Then nobody gets hurt. I don't get hurt. The other person doesn't get hurt.
Ultimately, that's probably the best. World War I, ceasefire on Christmas, get to know a little bit of your enemy a little better, and then nobody will fight and everybody has to get shipped in. That, fundamentally, if you can redirect a person's, energy, both their body and their mind, then huge changes can happen. It's still a story that we talk about today that, at least it gives me kind of that, the proof in the pudding that what you say can be real, that, if just more people took that personable action.
Yeah. Well, the civil rights movement showed that it works. Absolutely. Gandhi also showed that it worked with the British violence. He didn't resist it. He didn't meet it with violence. He just used non-violent civil protest, and it worked. The British left India, and then in Martin Luther King's time, the police forces and the other parts of society that were in direct conflict with Martin Luther King's principles, or black rights, they did their best to not meet it with violence. And it's hard to say that it actually worked, because there's so much evidence to say that it didn't work in America, at least today, and across the board, actually, here in the UK too. But it was a great effort, and it did do incredible things. It achieved incredible things. It's just that maybe
still better than it used to be. So, on a time frame,
we'll take it.
It's hard to see the forest through the trees, but by comparison.
Yeah. Well, I like that you mentioned that instead of rule, you used principles. And when you said that, a Bible verse popped into my head, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. It reads, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." That's King James Version. And especially in regards to, you had mentioned Ukraine and whatnot. These are trying times, as for a lot of people, as you said. So there's something to keep about, in mind, that there might be another level to this.
I believe there has to be, doesn't there?
Yeah.
There has to be an additional level, at least, because people do. This is my conflict at the moment. In my internal conflict, is that they're going to have to. They do have to defend themselves, but at the same time, we don't all need to charge in there and fight. We can do other things, which is why sanctions and the financial world is so interwoven these days that it has a significant impact. So there are other ways. There has to be other ways, because we've tried violence on violence. We've tried it throughout our history, and it hasn't worked in our favor. So there has to be another way. And yeah, I'll leave that there.
If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
What would he say? If anyone asked me, you asked me at the top, the first question was something like the best advice I've ever been given. I feel like the best advice I ever give is that you need to learn, whoever I speak to, you need to forgive yourself. But as with all things, the advice we give to others is normally the advice we need to hear ourselves. And I imagine my best friend might well say he'd be best served if he forgave himself a little more often. And because I, much like everyone else, I punish myself unnecessarily so, unreasonably so. There's just no need for the level of condemnation and punishment that I give myself. And to think that actually I'm so much more forgiving of myself than I have been in the other lifetimes that I've lived, even on this one planet, the iterations of my life, the military career and the time before that, it's I see them as different lifetimes because the contrasts have been so severe at times. But throughout that, I've punished myself unnecessarily. And so I would be best served to learn to forgive myself.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Oh, good one. You know what? I'll speak first on creatively because I'm going to, you know what? I saw another question here. What's the bravest thing you've ever done? And it links into this. Bearing in mind, again, what other people's perception of a combat veteran would be. They would imagine that the bravest thing that I've ever done was being gunfights, of which I've been in countless gunfights, and I've jumped out of many planes and done all of these sorts of things, and I don't consider them to be brave, to be honest, or courageous in any way. What is courageous for me is that throughout my life, again, whether I've acknowledged it or not, I've always known that I should be, I'm a mover. Right? This is why I teach things like Tai Chi and Qigong, and I've played sport at a decent level, many different sports. But dancing is something that I could never, ever accept, and that I could never allow myself to do, or at least very, very rarely. And it's only this year, in the last month, that I have actually allowed myself to accept dance classes from a friend of mine who's a teacher. And I love it. It's amazing. It's medicine, but it's also allowing me to express myself. And because I've denied it for so long, it's incredibly powerful. It's been profound these last few weeks. The profound experience for me, just giving myself permission to dance and learn how to dance, has just been fantastic. So I love people that give themselves permission to do the things that they are. And I am and have been a dancer, despite the fact that I've also been a martial artist and a combat veteran and so many other things. Behind all of that, I was a dancer, and I'm allowing myself to dance, and it's beautiful. So I love other people that do that.
What type of dance is it?
I'm not really interested. It goes back to, I'm not really interested in dogma. I'm not really interested in learning a style, because again, I've spent so long learning martial arts and teaching martial arts. They're all styles, and I'm less interested in styles and form. I'm interested in just a few basic steps for sure, but just I'm allowed to express myself through movement in tandem with music. Whereas, because I can express myself through movement, through martial arts and whatnot, and in sport. But it's that freedom of expressing myself to music, which seems like we've been doing that for a long time, which we as humans, obviously, we've been doing that for an awful long time. And to resist that urge is totally unhealthy. And I've done that for 42 years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look how popular music is, singing, gospel within church, dancing. I mean, birds sing, there's this voicing thing. So it's part of consciousness that's around us that I don't think most people would consider that a bird sings because that's what birds do, but do humans sing because that's what humans do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The reason I'd asked what type it was is because I had to take a modern dance course in university when I went for my philosophy degree. It was a not general studies, liberal arts college, right? So we were well-rounded individuals when we graduated. So, but yeah, I'm usually a relatively reserved, I am a reserved person. I lead private, relatively try to be as much as I can, really. But so taking the dance class was way out of my comfort zone. But it is freeing if you allow yourself to get into it. It was, so it was a great experience for me. And funny note, I ended up making friends with the instructor. So we were, we shared some cannabis behind the university once. So, beautiful things can come when you put yourself outside of your comfort zone, right? And open yourself up to, expressing yourself, really.
Yeah. It takes great courage to do that. I think we're going to touch on that in a couple of other questions as well. It takes great courage to allow yourself. That's why it's the bravest. I prefer the word courage. It's the most courageous thing I've ever done, is to allow myself to dance. And it's the hardest thing because I was terrified when I started. But you're right. Once you do it, it's wonderful. Whatever it is, whatever your thing is, we're just both talking about dance, but it could be anything. It could be anything. It could be singing, like you said as well. These things are inherent in us. We've got vocal cords. We've got a body. We sing and we dance. We breathe.
But not only that, and I'm always, one of the core marketing things that I've always grasped onto is just the idea, if you're on the phone and you want somebody to, feel that you're happy, is smile, because you'll sound happy and eventually you'll just be happy. But that goes to this entire dancing thing that, moving your body to some other rhythm may invoke something in you that wasn't there before. A new way of thinking or a new way of being, of health, and doesn't have to be described by science because it just is.
Yep. Yeah. It's great. I'm experiencing that right now. It's great.
Yeah. Well, laughter's the best medicine, exercise is the best medicine. These all have very core, the way you move and the way you think.
Yeah. I agree.
What is the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
I'll go with humbling. There's an embarrassing one we might talk about as well, but I'll go with humbling. Most humbling experience in my life is being, and it happens constantly, is teaching and being in a position to be of service to people. It sounds so cliche. I'm just being honest with you. It's humbling to give someone the tools so that they can go away and heal themselves. And when they come back, you can see something in their eyes where it's worked, where they've worked really hard and they've got the results, or if not the full results, they know they're on the path to get their results. That is a humbling experience, but it's a beautiful experience. One of my favorite things to see. It's just that look in their eye where you think, oh, I played some small role in what they've managed to achieve there. I just love it. I don't think I'll ever get tired of that. Whether I teach or not, whatever format I get to witness that, I will always love to witness it. And I will always be humbled if I get to play some small role in that process, whatever the process is for that person. It's very humbling, but it's very rewarding as well.
This ties in with the Heroic Hearts Foundation work that you do, correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, it does, yeah, directly, but also through when I teach one-to-one people, and I give them these body-based tools or meditational practices or whatnot,
Right.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, because I was just speaking in regards to the tools, whatever they may be, whether it's through plant medicines, which some people it works for them, or whether it's through other modalities, which you also offer. So in regards to the tools, though, is there any one in particular, whether it's I think the Heroic Hearts, they do 2 types of work with psilocybin and ayahuasca, and then aside from that, other modalities include breath work. Do you find that everybody, I hate to generalize, so I'm not going to, but the efficaciousness of one or the other, I guess? I mean, everybody's different, but
Yeah.
some people maybe don't feel called to try and I don't want to say experiment, but maybe they don't need that guide in their, it doesn't resonate with them. How would one go about, I guess I don't know what I'm asking.
Well, I suppose with things like plant medicine, because it's such a big step in someone's life, that really, if you're called to it, then we're happy to have a further conversation. But we're not interested in pushing this stuff on anyone. I mean, that's not what we're about at all. And I wouldn't agree with that sort of thing. But yeah, if there's a calling, but when you get that calling, it can also be daunting. It can be very daunting because, people do their own research and they hear of how difficult experiences on psychedelics and plant medicine can often be. And it's true, it can be very difficult, but ultimately I believe it's very rewarding. So if people feel the call, then there are people out there that can help facilitate or help connect you to whatever it is that resonates with you, ayahuasca, psilocybin, whatever it is, MDMA. But that's also true of meditation or a particular type of meditation. And that's true of whether someone feels the call to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or whether they prefer to do yoga. And it's just trying to allow the work at Heroic Hearts is we can only expand our network so far. And what we really want to do is, there are certain things out there like yoga that is so well promoted and advertised that we don't feel the need to add to that, because loads of people know that yoga is good for you. And I'm sure they would have tried yoga before now. So we don't feel the need to sort of promote that. But things like breath work, I know that Wim Hof is very influential, but there are lots of different types of breath work. And so we just want to, I suppose at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is help veterans understand that you haven't got the only options that are available to you. They're not only SSRIs, antidepressants, or talking therapies, because for a lot of veterans, they simply don't work or they're actually harmful. And so we just want to provide some options that are not that, so that there's this sense of hope, because I felt hopeless when I realized that SSRIs and talking therapies didn't work for me. So we're just trying to create an environment where it's like, well, there's this option. You can try this if you want, because unfortunately, not unfortunately, there are situations and personal circumstances where we have to deny people access to plant medicine. At least for us, we are not in a position where we feel that that's a responsible thing to do. So we have to deny someone spaces on our retreats based on their current situation. But we felt that it wasn't very helpful to just say, I'm sorry, we can't help you. So, see you later. That's why we thought, well, look, there's the options for medical cannabis. There's CBD as an option. There's breath work. There's acupuncture. There's equine therapy. which is using horses to well, I haven't got the words, but yeah, horses as a form of being around in the presence of horses to bring about healing or therapy. So we just want to provide these options for people, not only if we have to turn them away from psychedelics, but in combination with psychedelics.
But that's a whole system approach. You know, if you go and you have a transmission problem with your car, it's not going to help if they change out your spark plug. So, you know, different medicines, different approaches, different balances, plus every single person is different than placebo, right. Nocebo effect. Which do you believe in? There's so many things that offering the whole system approach, you know, it's not the, you know, take an aspirin, call me in the morning. What other options do you have? And that's amazing because all of those that you above mentioned are amazing therapies within their own right. And not everything works for everybody.
Right. Yeah. Including psychedelics. So that's why we need to have other options, because breath work can be incredible. Spending time with horses or any animals, to be honest. Even this noisy dog that's laying next to me, mm-hmm. She's wonderful. She's a sensitive
and I
soul.
want more people to understand, you know, taking psychedelics and doing breath work and things like that you're actually causing dumps of natural, you know, psychedelic chemicals, cannabinoids, things within your own system, mm-hmm. you know, so you're in a sense biohacking in the same way. But not everybody has the same system. Some people have been damaged and they don't have the same, you know, ability to produce those natural things, and nature has it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you say, everyone's different. So we can't provide everything, but some things are so popular that we don't need to waste our time doing it. And other things are not popular enough, and we might be able to signpost a few people and it might just be the thing for them, you know, and then great. That would make me very happy.
What is your greatest fear? How did you overcome it?
The strongest reaction that I've had in the last couple of years, I suppose, that would be based around fear. Strangely, so I'm in a very fortunate position where I managed to purchase a home in Italy just before the lockdowns, and I bought it because I want to host retreats, professional retreats, you know, for the things that I teach, Tai Chi and whatnot. But some friends of mine said that they would like to spend a holiday. They would like to have a holiday at my home. And I think that my home is beautiful and wonderful and has a very special energy about it. And it's just a wonderful place, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bought it. And I thought that they were going to have a wonderful, wonderful time. And they had a really difficult time. And it took, they were really displeased with their experience, and of it, because we were friends, they felt able to tell me honestly about their feelings, which I'm very grateful for. But my fear is that, you know, I don't like to let people down on that sort of level. I found that really hard to manage, and it got me down. It got me really down. So physical fears, I'm not really too interested in. You know, I'm sure there's probably things that would frighten me, but it's this sense that I let my friends down. I know that it sounds like really superficial because they were only going on holiday, but honestly, it really got me down when I found out. I was expecting them to have such a wonderful experience, and they really didn't, and it hurt. So it's that letting people down, and I haven't overcome that, because I know that if that was to happen again, I'd be distraught again. It would be really difficult for me. So that's a superficial. Well, it's not so superficial because it really did hurt me. But there are other examples of that in my life where it's like, oh, I let that person down, or I spoke out of turn and was indiscreet, and I've let someone down. That I've done that before, in quite a serious way, and it caused a lot of pain and suffering for quite a lot of people. So that was really difficult for me, and I haven't overcome it. I know that that's still there, so I've got lots more meditating to do.
Well, it's also good fuel, because next time something presents itself, the consequences are so apparent that, I don't know, I sometimes hold my past experiences as a necessary for me to understand how I have to correct.
Yeah.
Especially in that regards when
totally.
it comes to that, like social stuff, it's, oh my gosh, everything's so complicated. You try to do right and you're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But like you say, it is a lesson. If you can see it that way, then it's really healthy, and you can grow and develop. But that's a work in progress for me personally.
What is your single greatest driving force in life, and how do you further it?
Yeah, that's easy. I've since my experience with ayahuasca, is that I am here to be of service, and I'm here to try and help people on an individual scale, and maybe even on a macro scale. But if I know that I'm being of some form of service, then I am driven and motivated and content, and everything in life feels great. So I try and further that by just doing that as much as possible. Hence, Heroic Hearts is a way of serving people. The veterans community, my teaching of Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation is clearly serving these groups that I teach and the individual students that I have. Just working in my community. I live in a wonderful community. So I just try and do what I can, really. It can often be just small things. It's not like it has to be in the format of Heroic Hearts and an organization or anything like that. But yeah, when I know I'm being of service of someone or to something, I feel driven and motivated and happy. Yeah.
Do you think that's a core part of being a human being, that not to obtain, but when you are in that service, in that position, all the other things that we want to attain in life and the plants help us see the way to find a balance and a way within the system to work?
Yeah, I do. It's just hard to see that because, I joined the military because I thought I was being of service. But I was being of service in some regard, but I was also actually I joined a unit that only did one thing, and that was fight and destroy. And again, it was incredibly exciting, my experience in Afghanistan, but there's a lot of pain involved in that as well. But I still thought I was being of service until I realized that for me, my truth was that actually that wasn't any real form of service. That was, militarily speaking, I was still being of service to my friends in my unit, and they were being of service to me, helping us through these experiences and other experiences as well. But being in that environment is not conducive. This is my perspective. I would rather be of service in another way.
Well said. Who were or are your role models, and why?
Jim Morrison was actually a really early role model for me, and I was a destructive young man. So, yeah, maybe he wasn't the best role. I'm here today, so
Not everybody can be a candle. Some people got to burn like a flare.
Yeah, I was burning, and it was. In some regards, it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot of valuable lessons, painful, some of them quite painful. But again, that guy was a free dancing rock god, and I wanted that sort of freedom of expression. So that's why I found him so entrancing at that time. It was just a powerful young man as well, just a young man. I'm older than he was by 10 years when he died, over 10 years. A powerful young man that obviously did a lot of damage to himself and other people, but also brought a great deal of joy and did his best to express his and culture. but most importantly, on the personal level,
Yeah.
he was trying to express himself and his truth, and I admired that the balls of it, to be frank. So that's one. And I've already mentioned the other is that the work of Martin Luther King has just been revelatory to me. I'm not Christian. I'm not a religious person. I feel like I'm spiritual, but his sermons and his writings and his talks and his actions. So we're all flawed. We'll get that out there now, but that's some role model, and I do my best to live in line with those truths that I believe are truths. And like I said earlier, I've been tested recently, but I hold them dear, and I do try to stick to those principles of nonviolence.
You nailed it, though. Truths. Martin Luther King's word and message and vision continues to have power and good because it's a core fundamental truth. The same thing in the music, that expression that's coming out in that music connects to people in the way that there's a reason so many artists don't tell you what is, in their lyrics, because it means so much to you. Dave Grohl, breaks your heart when you find out Learn to Fly is about getting a flying lesson, but to other people, because that expression, it manifests in other people. And yeah, it's truly beautiful how music can carry emotions in that way where it reverberates differently in different people.
Yeah, because it gets translated according to our own current circumstances and our historic experiences. So it's open to interpretation, which is art.
Hey, and now you're getting back into it, right? You're trying to find that power of your youth back in the dance. I mean, because he was a mover on stage.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Well, it's very inspiring.
Yeah, he was. I love that you mentioned him because, well, number one, because of what he did, but we actually got to interview a man by the name of Ken Rolla, who was able to work with Coretta Scott King towards the end of her life in a somewhat of a physician's role for the family. And so being able to hear, I mean, you're aware that, I mean, obviously everybody knows that Dr. King was assassinated by the powers that be. So I think as a role model, I really think that there's something to say about not putting anybody on a pedestal per se, but Dr.
I agree.
Dr. King would be, maybe an exception to the maybe an exception to the example in the fact. I mean, maybe it's I have to edit all my maybes out, but maybe it's illustrated more so in the fact that he made himself a target by being such a uniter. So
I would agree with your previous point about don't put people on a pedestal as well. I agree with that. Because the man was flawed as well, we're only human beings. But the power for good, the force for good that he was, I believe, far outweighed any of his flaws. And so I hold him in the highest regard.
He was so dangerous to the establishment, it was an inevitability. And for somebody to be able to walk into that fire, walk into the knowledge of knowing that this was a likely or possible conclusion and still holding fast says something to the character and that message. I mean, people understand that ultimate sacrifice when the truth resonates with them, because then you feel the same way. And when everybody feels the same way, you can't take that truth away.
I would also like to add that for the pure context of my life, so I was a very, very bitter, resentful, angry, and violent young man in my younger days, and not so younger days. And we were talking about narratives earlier, and I have let go of a lot of those narratives of anger and violence, and that they're not conducive to well-being. But it's that transformation I found inspired by actually Malcolm X, because that guy was a hateful, angry man. I mean, he was angry to the end anyway, but I'm talking about in his younger years. I mean, he was really hateful. And I'm sure he would have been thoroughly dislikable. And yet that man turned it around and spread nothing but peace and love and respect across the board by the time that he was also assassinated. And so he's another, for me, because of the entirety of his life and how the 180 degrees of it, I hold him in high regard as well, because I can see similarities between my own existence and his. And hopefully I don't get shot.
No, listen,
shot at enough.
No, all that emotion was coming out from experience, and it was an experience upon an entire country, and everybody was feeling it. So, you know, he, like any of us, you know, people that lead great movements are a reflection of what's going on underneath. So, you know, it was just another angle, another facet of the movement. And yeah, I mean, you said it well. He turned it around.
Yeah, he turned it big time.
Yeah.
Time. Really inspiring. It's hard to do that, you know, because we have those narratives that are so entrenched. It's hard. It takes great courage to be able to say, no, I was wrong. This is truth. That was just nonsense. That was crazy. I was wrong. And this is what I now profess. This is what I now teach. That's really hard, because it can be, you know, it can be embarrassing. I don't think it is embarrassing. It takes great courage, but from the perspective of the person about to do it, there can be a sense of embarrassment and be like, oh, well, I've just spent all of my years saying this, and now I'm about to go turn around and say this, which is in total opposition to it. So it takes great courage. He had great courage. All of those people that I've mentioned were courageous.
What quality do you most admire in a woman?
I don't want to sound any more cliched than I already have, but my wife is the kindest person. She's just the kindest, most generous person. And it's wonderful. Yeah, sorry, cliched, but it's true. I hope she's not listening in the other room.
It would be so terrible if she heard that.
I mean, it's so I like that you mentioned kindness, just because I post a meme for the show every day, a gratitude meme on our socials, and today is just a meme that says, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about." So I like your answer. Yeah,
and it's true. I mean, that is wisdom. It's hard to employ when we're confronted by aggression or whatever we're confronted by that triggers us. But yeah, to be honest, you could have changed that question. It doesn't have to be in a woman. It's just my favorite people are kind and generous, and yeah.
Well, that's the better world. You know, if somebody gives you a smile, it changes your entire attitude. If you have a bad attitude, you might get into a fight with somebody, you know, honking at somebody you're not. It's like stuff happens. And, you know, it's the little things that propagate. So those people that always exude that energy, that are always influencing people they come in contact with, they're doing so much more in the world than we could ever even understand.
Yeah, but on the reverse of that as well, all of the things that we are doing, that is, well, every action has a consequence, you know. So that's why it's best to try and be kind, because all of your actions have consequences. So it's best to stick with kindness and generosity and try to remain calm is most helpful. Whereas,
well, I like the way you view it.
violence.
I like the way you view it. You know, the mind influences the body. And I have this idea that everything is connected and there is no end. So if that connects to everything, including the world, I mean, it's really important how we interact. And, you know, maybe there is something more to how these thoughts manifest into how we treat each other and the experiences that we have. And, you know, if just more of us just had a smile and were super kind and, you know, could just duck roll with things, like we might find a utopia we didn't know existed just through a shift in thought. And So yeah, I love that because to me it proves it. If you can influence your body with the mind, well, waves and magnetism propagate. So let's fix
It
the
also
world.
works in reverse. The body influences the mind. If your body
Yes.
is really tense and hard and inflexible, your mind is highly likely to be hard and tense and inflexible. So the mind and body are one. It's not that the mind or the body is well, no, the mind is in the hierarchical structure, I would suggest.
Oh, yeah. Like when you do a superhero pose.
Influences the mind.
Have you ever done that? You do like a superhero pose and you do that for like 3 or 4 minutes and you start to feel empowered. You're like, and it's like, well, what is that? Well, there's a power in that pose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But also when earlier on, when I was talking about the best advice that I was ever given was, what muscles can you leave relaxed?
Oh yeah.
And still perform your activity.
Oh wow.
If you're overly tense, your mind is going to be overly tense and you're not going to be calm and relaxed, and you'll find it harder to be compassionate and forgiving or kind and generous because your body is hard and tense. So if you can, I would suggest that the body is the easier target for our focus, because the mind is abstract. The body is here and we can work on the body. So if we recognize and become sensitive to the tensions that are stored in our body, and we can learn to release the tensions. I'm not talking superficial stuff. I'm talking deep held tension within the body, habitual tension. If we can learn to relax that, the mind follows, and the mind becomes more relaxed and more pliable and more able to withstand some of the onslaughts that we might face in our daily life that challenge us. We're better able to remain calm, better able to have equanimity. And if we can do that, then we're far more likely to be compassionate and forgiving of people that we interact with, regardless of how they interact with us. So I would suggest that the body is actually the better starting place than the mind, because of the nature
that's
of the mind
amazing.
is abstract.
And I've never thought about it, but that also gives like a direct physical way into maybe rewriting pain pathways by changing the muscles and your tension. If you can loosen it up, just allowing something to no longer be held. That's a fascinating little body hack.
Yeah, because you're holding on to something in your mind as well.
Yeah.
So let go of the body, let go of the mind. You might not even be consciously aware of it. You would rarely be consciously aware of it at the level of the mind, but you can do it at the level of the body. Beginners can do it at the level of the body, and there'll be real world benefits to it. But it's hard work. I would say that it's really hard work. It's hard work to dig deep inside the body and focus the mind onto that tension and find that tension and dig it out. It's really, really difficult.
Well, yeah, in this world, you surviving on a day-to-day basis through the seasons, that kind of stuff would bring it out in you. And now, we don't have that stress to implement it. So,
but we have more, and we also have more tools as well,
that's true. More knowledge of the.
Yeah.
What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
I gave myself permission to dance.
That's awesome.
By far the most courageous thing I've ever done. It was terrifying, but I did it, and I've done it, and I keep doing it.
Did you have an experience or something that prevented dance from being the way of expressing, or was just expression in general and dance is kind of...
No, I did have a problem with expressing myself, with articulating myself verbally. I had a problem with that. I'm fortunate I had a partner that helped me learn how to better express myself verbally. But no, I think it's something to do with dance and my concept of masculinity at that young age that then took root. That you see, actually, this leads me on to something that I've known for a long time, is that actually, so characters in film have actually played a big part of my life. So I saw, and I know I'm not unique in this at all, but when I was very young, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I'm not a fan of the modern iterations of it, but when I was a young boy and I saw Luke Skywalker looking over the sand at the two setting suns, I found myself looking out at sunsets as a young boy, thinking there's got to be adventure out there for me. I can't be stuck here in this suburban. It didn't mean anything. My world didn't mean anything. So there's got to be some adventure out there. So Luke Skywalker was one of these fictional characters that actually had real meaning for me. But two that I hid away, and I've never actually said this publicly, is that the lead characters in Dirty Dancing, which is Johnny. Oh no, I've forgotten the actor's name now.
Kevin
Patrick
Bacon?
Swayze.
Oh, the other one.
No, that's Footloose.
Oh my Lord.
Patrick Swayze, and as his role as Johnny in Dirty Dancing, because that guy was a tough guy, but he was also sensitive enough to allow himself to dance, right? But I tucked that away. I tucked him away, and I preferred to stick with, I'm more influenced by Luke Skywalker and Pete Mitchell in Top Gun, because they're heroic adventurers and they're fighting evil in the world and winning. But the character of Johnny in Dirty Dancing, he was a tough guy, right? But he was sensitive enough and vulnerable enough that he allowed himself to dance, and that made him happy. And so he has stuck with me, but it's been a secret. It's been a real secret, and that's the first time I've ever said it out loud. And then also, Danny Zuko in Greece is the same, because on the surface, the guy's a tough guy. But obviously, we all know that underneath, he's not tough in any way. But he allows himself to sing and dance, and that makes him happy. And that he finds love. They both find love and meaningful relationships because they are sensitive and vulnerable enough as men to allow themselves to sing and dance. And I tucked those two away for a long, long time. But those two are as true as Luke Skywalker and Pete Mitchell.
It's interesting that you don't really see too many stories with that motif, the strong masculine that is also vulnerable and comfortable in that position. Like, I can't remember, I don't know, like besides Greece, I guess that would be like the most recent example of something like that.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson talks about that in the modern world for young men, there's just not enough books for a man to have that person, that hero, that classical role model in literature. It's just, it hasn't existed in our society in a very long time.
Yeah, because they're all warriors, and which is why I ended up going into the military. I was influenced just as much as the next guy. But yeah, you're right. There's, you mentioned, who did you just say? Yeah, Kevin Bacon, right, in Footloose, which I only saw recently last month for the first time.
Oh, wow.
But as a character, he's an incredibly courageous young man, because he knows that dance is a really powerful tool. It makes him and his community happy, and that it can open healthy debate. And, more importantly, people can just have a great time and move their bodies and have fun. So that's another great example. I only actually, like I just said, I only just watched Footloose for the first time a couple of weeks ago, but it's still that's a great character, for the same reasons why Danny Zuko and Johnny are.
Well, and this really kind of ties things together. I feel like I always go back to Darren Brown, the guy who reads people's minds, and but he's very good at it. But what he says is people are the stories that they tell themselves. Mm-hmm. And this is very important in the knowledge, because, if we become these stories and we can become these heroes and become better, we're reflections of the things we're consuming. And, not to pick on anything in particular, but, maybe The Walking Dead has a different benefit than, some other, like Star Wars, you're feeding your mind in the way that you do nutrition, in the way that it gives you new thoughts and inspirations. And, sometimes maybe the real way, like a way to change your world, is to look at what you're exposed to and consuming and change that.
Exactly.
And pick up a book you're not used to, that you're not going to like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the visual auditory is just the same as what you put in your body. So if you're a nutritionist, so let's say a lot of men are taking this seriously now, the looking after their bodies, because some of the practices that are being promoted aren't actually that healthy, but at least there's physical exercise being done on some level. But then they also realize that without exercise just on its own and a poor diet is not going to take you very far. So they get interested in nutrition, which is about what they're ingesting, which is exactly your point. But you have to be careful about other things that you ingest, which is, what do you read? What do you watch? If you only watch horror movies, or you watch, I haven't got an example to jump, but it's going to affect you. You're ingesting that into your system. And it can be fun to watch horror. I mean, I don't personally like them, but I know plenty of people that they love horror movies, and that's fine, absolutely fine. But, if that's the only sort of thing that you ingest, is just as an example, then that's eventually going to, everything has a consequence, and that's going to have a consequence that you might have to work through at a later date. Whereas perhaps if you ingest, balance is key, right? That's why it's fine to watch horror movies, even though that's just an example. Balance is key. You can't just go around listening to, you can, but for a lot of men, it's not going to be feasible to go around listening to hymns, let's say. And even though that's going to have a very calming influence, and sometimes it might be inspiring as well, depending on the style of music and the hymn itself. Or like you're reading sermons of Martin Luther King or something. It's all very healthy and positive, but there's still got to be balance in the world. So that's why watching the Walking Dead is great, because it's entertainment. And sometimes in that TV show, because I've watched it, they answer good questions that come up. But ultimately, it's about balance. I wouldn't be much of a Tai Chi teacher if I didn't talk about the importance of balance. So you can,
water's good for you. Too much will kill you. Every single aspect of life. So,
yeah.
What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
I don't know if I can answer that. All I can tell you is what it means for me to be a man. Just me as an individual. I don't think I can answer for any other man. But for me, what I've learned is that the more that we lie to ourselves, the more that we hide our truths from ourselves, the more difficult life becomes. And the more work that needs to get done later down the line to heal yourself from some of the trouble that you'll get yourself into because the lies you told yourself, or the truths that you hid from yourself. My example of that is what we've just been talking about, is that I denied my truth of how important dancing was to me. That was a very young age. I acknowledged that and hid it. And then it took me to go to Afghanistan and engage in extreme destruction, the most extreme destruction and desperate trauma. I had to go down all of this path and heal myself from all of that through plant medicine and get engaged with Tai Chi and meditation and whatnot. All of that might have actually come about because I hid the importance of dance in my life. If I had have just embraced it, I might have not needed to go to war and start killing people. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but it's possible. So what I've come to understand is that the healthiest thing you can do is not hide your own truths from yourself and learn to express yourself. A lot of men struggle to express themselves adequately. And mostly what I'm referring to there is articulation, verbal expression. We're not taught to express ourselves adequately. And most people aren't taught how to listen adequately. So, if you try and tell a veteran, or if I try and tell a veteran to say, well, it's good, you can talk about these things. Some of my experiences and other veterans, their experiences are, no, when I talk about these things, I can't express myself properly. So I get frustrated. And then when I'm frustrated, I get angry. When I'm angry, I get violent. And then because of that, my wife, just an example, their wife would see, oh my God, well, he starts talking about it and he gets angry and violent. So I don't want to listen to it. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to engage in this. And then everything's broken. Whereas if we get taught how to express ourselves adequately from our own perspective, just whatever that means to that individual, if it's adequate for you, that will no doubt be much more beneficial. But then we also need to surround ourselves with people, and socially we need to take responsibility for the education in both sides, how to listen, which was my next point. How do you listen? And how do we express ourselves adequately? This example is about vocalizing and articulating ourselves, but as we've discussed throughout this episode, it can be through movement. It can be in many different ways. There can be destructive ways. There can be creative ways. I would suggest that it might be best to lean towards the more creative practices than the destructive ones. So yeah, it's learn how to express yourself. Give yourself permission to express yourself. You have that permission. You're not accepting it. We all have permission to express ourselves. We just don't take that opportunity.
Well, if it's embarrassment, you're listening to everybody else. And the embarrassment is because you're fighting an urge that's there. So, yeah, dive into it.
But you might not have the tool. That's the point. You might not have the tool, and that can lead to frustration and anger. And that's my experience, and my experience with other veterans as well. Is they don't have the tools. Then
that's sad.
That's why plant medicine and movement, actually, you don't need the words. Plant medicine might actually put you on the path to learn how to express yourself in an appropriate way. And movement doesn't need words as well. So, making music,
and they complement each other.
Right, exactly.
I mean, ultimately, plant, is nutrition. You're absorbing and becoming one. And if you're gaining knowledge and experience from it and it's positive, then, sounds like an amazing nutrient, even if it's just for the mind.
Yeah.
I like that we touched on using, expressing ourselves, being vulnerable, having the tools to do so, and just in our own personal experiences. And I guess to speak of mine, like this podcast has been that for me. So, and I thank you, Keith, for coming on the show, because finding guests, males that are comfortable talking about subjects like this in a masculine way, but in a way that is also open to vulnerability can be a challenge sometimes. It's not really, it's kind of a niche market, so to speak, nowadays. So
if I may just add to that, sorry, thank you as well for your words. But if I might add, there's a lot of talk out there about men need to be more vulnerable, but no one actually says why you should be vulnerable. No one tells you what. They leave it there. People just say, oh, you need to be more vulnerable, and that's it. There's no next step. But the next step, at least from my understanding of things, the next step of vulnerability, you need to be vulnerable so that you can develop sensitivity to your own situation. That's the purpose of vulnerability. It's no good just telling someone that they need to be more vulnerable. You don't just tell someone, oh, you'll feel better if you're just more vulnerable. I mean, it's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything unless you tell them what the next steps are as well, or help them along the way. And the next step, I would suggest, is that you can only develop sensitivity to yourself, be that physical, psychologically, emotionally, or environmentally, through vulnerability. You need to be vulnerable to open yourself up to self-exploration. You can't do that if you're not vulnerable. So you need to be vulnerable to develop sensitivity to yourself. And that is not easy. And that can be incredibly hard work. That internal journey can be very hard. But ultimately, I found it to be the most rewarding thing in life, is understanding yourself. And then you can go about, when you understand yourself just a fraction better, then you can act accordingly and say, well, all right, say, for instance, well, then I need help. I've explored myself somewhat, just a small degree, and I have found that I'm actually not the person that I want to be and that I need help. Great. Go out there and find some help. Maybe that's plant medicine. Maybe that's just talking. Maybe you need to learn how to talk because your self-reflection has told you that you don't know how to express yourself properly. Either way, that's the purpose of the vulnerability. It's not just be vulnerable and everything will be great. That's just empty and meaningless. You need vulnerability in order to be sensitive and learn about yourself and your needs. And then you can go about taking action. And that is what I have found most men need. They just need a course of action, but not one prescribed from an outside source. They need a course of action that has come about through their own self-reflection, difficult as that is.
Yeah, I mean, because course of action, like once you point the way, I mean, Mars energy, I mean, the masculine energy takes over, and I mean, once point the direction, and we take off pretty easily, right?
Yeah.
But I love this. I thank you. Okay, so yeah, first of all, thank you for providing the other half of that equation, because I would have hated to end on that note without providing a practical pearl of wisdom that people can take away. Because the other half is to develop the sensitivity, because that's going to highlight the area in which you need to heal, correct? Is that right?
Yeah. Or develop. It doesn't necessarily need to be healing, just develop in some way. But yeah, that's the purpose of it. Too many people just stop there, just stop with, be more vulnerable. Men need to be more vulnerable. What the hell does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. You got to do something. Develop your sensitivity to yourself. But it's hard work and it can be very scary. So, prepare for that.
So where, I know besides your work with the Heroic Hearts Foundation, tell people where they can find you, because I know that, I mean, we've talked about for the last 2 hours how you help people with this process. So please let the people know where they can find you. And
So my website is keithjabraham.com. I am only on LinkedIn, so you'll just find me by Keith J. Abraham. Other than that, the Heroic Hearts, so I'm CEO of Heroic Hearts in the UK, and the social media handle for that is at Heroic Hearts UK. The website is heroicheartsuk.com, but there's also Heroic Hearts in the US for your guys, for your vets, and there's also a Heroic Hearts in Canada now, just setting up. So that's very early stages actually, but it's there. But the US is the original charity founded by Jesse Gould, a wonderful human being. So you can also check him out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith, once again. Adam, do you have any parting words or thoughts for the listeners?
No. I just want to thank you for coming on. Great wisdom, great view of the world. Great. Again, finding those interconnections. There's so many different ways to view the world, but the mind-body world connection is one that we all have access to that, the world wants us to forget, it seems like. So, it's just a reminder of how powerful we are.
Right. Exactly. Well said. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on and giving me your time.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Real pleasure.
Is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more?
Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Yo,
Why is there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't wanna Hawaii. I don't wanna Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't wanna Hawaii. I don't wanna Hawaii. Yo, why?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.